Well, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm standing back here today because I have to do my slides, so I apologize if you get a little kink in your neck, maybe reorient your chair, but the slides are going to be a lot more interesting than I'm going to be, so we'll just leave them up there. Just a little bit about me. I've been teaching and practicing Ayurveda for the last 6 years, since about 2006, and I have offered Intro to Ayurveda classes, probably at least 50 times over the years, from middle schools to in-services for physicians to, just so many different places. So it's fun to offer a class here at the Family Massage Education Center and share a little bit of knowledge with you guys. This is a little different format than I normally do with my intro classes. I'm bringing in some new concepts that are not often covered in intro classes because I found them to be more relevant and more helpful for rubber to the road as you leave this class, I can use this information. Because most of the time we talk about doshas and without a real complete assessment of the unique proportion of your doses through pulse diagnosis or a really long health history questionnaire, there's not a whole lot you can do with that information. So the information I'll provide tonight hopefully will give you a lot more, kind of practical knowledge. So, that being said, just starting with a little kind of premise of Ayurveda. So, what are we? What is our body? What is our minds? And how does that pertain to the concept of health? So, when we look at what we are, we find that every 5 days, stomach cells replace themselves. 90 days, we have an entire new set of red blood cells. Every 6 months, we have almost a completely new liver. And then if you were to actually, replace your liver, you could grow a whole new lobe in a couple months. So basically, within 1 year, 98% of all the molecules in our body have been replaced. So when we say that we are your body, you're referring to something that 1 year ago was not here. And I think the bone cells are the slowest, and it's about 7 years for your bone cells to completely replace themselves, so that 7 years ago, the body that you had is completely different than the body you have today. There's no resemblance other than the underlying blueprint that created that body. So that begs the question that, when we think of ourselves mostly as a body, but what are we actually if our body is, made of cells and those cells are different than they were? So that's the kind of premise behind the body, and then we'll talk about the brain. So I'm not a neuroscientist, but basically they've found that it's impossible for the human memory to fit into the amount of cells that are in the brain. If you're to break down the amount of gigabytes that you can put on a neuron, and you're to look at all the neuron cells in the brain, the proportions just don't compute. The amount of cells that we have in our brain doesn't actually allow us to have the amount of memories that most people hold in their brain. Especially if you're in the medical profession, they say that most doctors forget more in their lives than most people learn in their lives because their school is so memorization based. This is still kind of cutting edge theory, but they're finding that more likely our brains or our minds are actually more like a radio. And so they tune into a certain frequency that correlates to a memory, that correlates to whatever you're trying to remember. They tune into that just like you tune your radio to an AM frequency or an FM frequency, and then the information becomes present. Basically, this pattern of the physical body or the pattern of health or disease can be determined by non-material events. So there's a certain underlying intelligence that guides our body and helps our body to create balance or imbalance based on our ability to tune into this frequency. So this is kind of that mind-body connection. Mind-body is psychoneuroimmunology, is really showing that our nervous system, our mind, our emotions have a high effect on our body and will determine whether there's proper functioning. So if our mind isn't actually within us, it's our ability to tune into something else, to tune into this intelligent pattern, then the more that we can tune into that pattern, the more health that we can anticipate.
And is that like on a cellular basis, do you think?
What do you mean?
The intelligent patterning?
Yeah. The intelligent patterning is what guides the cellular process.
Yeah.
So it's basically the intelligence that's going to tell the DNA within the cell to replicate in a certain way and tell the cell to function in a certain way. So it's kind of that underlying intelligence. So this is where we start to get into to more of the Ayurvedic stuff. From the Ayurvedic perspective, there is more than one body, and they often call them Koshas. And so there's the etheric body, the emotional body, the mental body, the higher or abstract mind body. So these are a lot of bodies that I'm not going to fully cover, but I'm going to cover a few of them as they pertain to Ayurveda. So Ayurveda looks at the human being as being multidimensional, and we have one frequency of energy that determines our physical body, but we also have different frequencies of energies that determine our emotional body or our bliss body or these other areas of existence. And physics is finding plenty of research to support this, that we don't just operate on one level, we operate in many dimensions, and it just depends on our own individual sensitivity and our cultivation of that sensitivity, which of these levels we're able to operate on intelligently. Coming back to health, the three imperatives for health is this connection to pure consciousness. So I was talking about the mind being a radio, so to speak, connecting with another connecting with memories, but the mind also is what allows us to connect with the vital intelligence and the vital energy that is inherent in everything. And so the primary imperative for health is this connection to pure consciousness. And then we talked about each of these different planes of life, or these manifestations of existence, and each of those must be free of dirt and debris. So the idea is it's similar to pure consciousness being a light, and then there being all these different frames that light filters through, and then in each one of those frames there's like a little cutout or a little space for the light to shine through. So if that space is cloudy or there's debris in there, then the pure light of consciousness is not able to go through the hole in those different frames and shine clearly into our lives and guide us with the energy and intelligence. It's going to make our lives, easy in a certain sense. And so then these templates, or these different koshas or bodies, they must be balanced. So they can have dirt and debris in them, ama, which we'll talk about, but they can also be warped or distorted, have too much activity in them, too little activity, that sort of thing. So next we're going to talk about the 5 koshas that Ayurveda specifically focuses on. And the reason I bring this in is because Ayurveda has really been thought of as kind of a lifestyle and dietary science. And although that is true, that's not Ayurveda's primary focus. Ayurveda was cogitated by sages and seers in deep meditation. So most sciences of medicine are determined through evidence. They're determined through practicality, like I have the sickness, I take this herb, what happens? But Ayurveda was just cognized almost out of nothingness, out of this deep meditative state. And so it has a different, and it was given to humans as an opportunity to understand how life operates and understand how to do life-affirming activities instead of life-imbalancing activities. So the 5 different koshas, and I'll go through them more in depth, are the Annamaya kosha, or the physical body, or our physical reality, which I touched on briefly before. The Pranamaya kosha, or the etheric body, the energetic body. And then the Manomaya kosha, considered to be our astral body, or our emotional lower mental body. The Jnanamaya kosha, which is our causal body, it's the more archetypal plane, our higher mental plane, discriminating plane. And then the Anandamaya kosha, which is often called the spiritual body or the bliss body. So these are the 5 different bodies where this debris and this warping can take place. And so when there's a disease present or an imbalance present, Ayurveda tries to determine on which of these different phases of existence that imbalance is taking place. If you're treating a imbalance with diet and herbs, as you'll see, you're predominantly affecting the physical body, which as the physical body improves, that will make an effect on the other bodies. But if that is not the root cause of the disease, then you're treating something it's going to take a much longer time for the disease to resolve itself. Then if you're able to determine through Ayurveda that the problem is in the Manomaya kosha, and so you immediately start to treat the emotional and lower mental body, and then the disease will resolve much more quickly because you're not applying the therapy that works on a body that's not being affected. So we start with the grossest of the bodies, as far as the densest. So this is considered to be the densest conglomeration of energy, is in the Annamaya kosha, or the physical body. Anna means food, and so this is often referred to as the food body. Ayurveda basically sees the body as you are what you eat. So your physical body very much is what you ate, but because you have many other bodies, food is mainly used for prevention, and so at some point, to get the other bodies healthy, there are other therapies that can be implemented to do that. So like I said, it's the most dense expression. The Annamaya kosha is considered to be the most outermost sheath. So as you go inward into the being, the human being, you start to get into the more subtle realms. So the Anandamaya kosha is the one that's closest to the pure consciousness that shines that bright light of intelligence and energy. And the physical body is the outside shell. So it's like those little, think of those like little nutcracker nesting dolls. So the Annamaya kosha is on the very outside, and then as you go to the very center of that, you get into pure consciousness. So when imbalances occur on this sheath, they occur through wrong diet, through lifestyle choices, through environmental toxins, through different routines, sleep deprivation, over or under exercise. And so the modalities that are most often used are dietary, different routines, abhyanga, which is a form of Ayurvedic massage, panchakarma, which are the detoxification and purification therapies that are used in Ayurveda, and then different herbal therapies. So when we think of different Ayurvedic treatments, these are usually the ones that come to mind most often, or that most people have heard of, because most people associate themselves with their physical body, and so those are the interventions that are most familiar to them. But because Ayurveda sees 4 other sheaths, we'll also look at those 4 sheaths and the other interventions that can be helpful on each of those levels. So this is the next sheath. It's the Pranamaya Kosha, or the energetic sheath. And the Pranamaya Kosha contains all the energy flows of the body. The Pranamaya Kosha is the body that is most strongly affected by yoga. And so oftentimes you'll hear a lot about prana in the practice of yoga, because it's the prana that flows through the subtle energy channels of the body. And it's the prana that will determine the health of these different channels, which in Ayurveda are called the nadis. And then at the nadis, there's about 72,000 nadis within the body. There's 14 main nadis that are recognized in the yogic and Ayurvedic arts. And each of those, there's 3 main nadis among those 14. And each of those 3 nadis have junction points where they meet. And those are considered to be the chakras, where the subtle energy centers, where each of those 3 main channels meet with one another. Because those are the main channels and they have such a strong influence on the mind and on the body, then the chakras become very important. They're able to kind of transform these higher vibrations into action. So the Pranamaya Kosha often also deals with our vitality. And if our prana is good, if we're cultivating a lot of prana through different practices, then we'll have a lot of vitality. We'll have a lot of energy. It is very much the energy body. It determines the amount of energy that we have and the amount of energy that we're able to put out in the world. So it can be imbalanced. It can be imbalanced by different traumas, where we get different cellular memories that hold us in traumatic patterns. It can also, these flows in the body necessitate a certain amount of exercise to move the energy around in the body, and so that can help to break any stagnation that may accumulate in those different channels. It can also be imbalanced by emotional ama, which is basically unprocessed emotions or toxic emotions that arise within the system, or lack of emotional flow, and that's very strongly related to the next kosha that we'll talk about. And then also, because the subtle channels relate to the physical channels in the body, they relate to the circulation, they relate to the spinal cord is considered to be kind of a physical manifestation of the most important of those different channels. If there's toxicity within the physical body, that can also compromise the flow of energy and compromise our vitality. So the therapies that are used at this level are yoga and yoga therapy. And then marma therapy is a system of Ayurvedic massage that's very similar to acupuncture in the sense that there are different points that are utilized. There's about 112 different points on the physical body that are utilized. And marma points are said to be junction points where the practitioner can directly access the consciousness of the person that they're working on. So marma therapy has gone way underground. It's very hard to learn because they don't want people just going around and accessing other people's consciousness, because that's a big responsibility when you're able to access the deepest layer of somebody. And you better know what you're doing if you're going to affect change on that level. Then there's panchakarma, the detoxification therapies that often integrate Ayurvedic massage. The Ayurvedic acupuncture is based on those marma points, and it's just using needling to access those different points. And then meditation is one of the primary therapies used in balancing the pranamaya kosha. So that's the energetic body. And then we have the manomaya kosha. So mono means mind. And it's one aspect of the mind specifically. It's that aspect of the mind that relates to desire, to the ego, to emotions, to beliefs, and to thought. So sometimes in esoteric literature you'll hear it called the lower mental plane. And it's the lower mental plane that we often will tap into when we're sleeping. We go through about 4 different stages of sleep, but this is one of the planes that will be tapped into when we're sleeping. And I find in my practice that this is usually the most often the underlying cause of most imbalances. So that goes back to the beginning where we talked about Ayurveda as a system of mind-body medicine, and the growing amount of research and psychoneuroimmunology that shows that the mind has a strong effect on the physical body. And so because the imbalances that I see in this sheath and then the growing amount of research, managing the mind becomes very important. And you learning how to use your mind as a tool for health becomes remarkably important as well. So